Now, despite not being confirmed just yet, it looks like Viktor Gyokeres will be on his way to Arsenal in the coming days, with the deal looked to be agreed. Now, in this video, we're going to go through exactly how Arsenal can get the best out of Viktor Gyokeres specifically in their team, and what sort of systems and play you can expect from him to really elevate the squad. So let's get into it. Now, first of all, everyone will know on this channel that I was a big fan of Benjamin Šeško and he was my guy, but I've always maintained the fact that Gyokeres would be a good signing for Arsenal. Now, over the last week, I've done hours upon research on Gyokeres and how he would probably fit within this team. And although I've come up with some ideas, it will be interesting to see how Arteta uses him, because I expect him to develop still quite well, even though he is 27. Now, Viktor Gyokeres is definitely going to define opinions within Arsenal, and I even think a lot of analysts you will talk to will have different opinions on how good he will be. Now, first, we're going to look at exactly what he will bring in the team that is very good. And although the stats we can talk about might be a bit swayed because of the league and the situation he plays in, I ultimately think these things are quite positive signs for a player coming in. Now, number one, he is seen as that elite power forward in world football. Yet again, we spoke about the Portuguese league multiple times, and there's been a sense of Viktor Gyokeres being able to use his strength a lot more against weaker opponents than stronger ones. But I do think when you look at someone who makes the amount of runs that he does in behind, he is usually very good at pushing the team up the pitch. Now, if you look at this data here by Scouted, which I recommend any of you go and subscribe to, they do brilliant stuff over there. Viktor Gyokeres is very far much forward than a lot of players you see. Even Benjamin Šeško is a lot deeper. You can see him on the record. Now, the reason why Viktor Gyokeres is lower than some of these other players like a Šeško in terms of the height of the graph is because when he receives the ball often, he can't really turn it into shots. This means that he's picking the ball up from these runs to get through for the team, but he's not actually been able to create anything for him. Now, this can be seen as a good and bad thing. The reason why I say good thing is because when I watch Sport and Play, some of the times his runs aren't central. He has to peel out to the left or even peel out to the right sometimes to be able to affect the ball to get the team up the pitch. There's also many times where the ball is not perfect into him. There'll be a ball that's over here or maybe he can't get to. And ultimately, there's a lot of things that I think is not on his fault. If he has better players around him, better players more are capable of putting the ball through, you would think that these would be a much more accurate, giving him the chance to get there. Now, Gyokeres specifically is almost like a car motor. He takes a bit of time to get going when he first gets a sprint, but in big spaces and a long time on the ball, he can be really quick with the ball on his feet. And I think when he starts going, that's when you start to see the dribbling. Although can be a little bit clunky here and there, he will be able to go past players, which will be a very unique thing that Arsenal simply don't have. Another thing that I particularly like about Gyokeres is that he is a strong player. I know some analysts will go out and say he's not fast, he's not strong. I don't really agree with that, especially on the fast point, but I can see some concerns with his strength. It's been mentioned multiple times that he scored a huge amount of goals, around 70% of them, against the lower 11 teams in the Portuguese league. Now, while I will say I agree with this definitely is factual information, it is because he can clearly just bully these players a lot more than others. We even see it in certain games against like Sturm Graz in the Champions League. Now, he had a good game against Sturm Graz and was decent in that moment, but when the defender gives him too much space or isn't close enough to him, he can just bully them, push him out the way, and use his pace and strength, especially when he keeps going, to take that ball into the box and to get a shot away. Now, I do think overall this isn't a negative thing and shouldn't be seen as it. He is a strong player, and I think when you compare him to some of the elite talents he's played against, he's still given them a relatively good game. Now, he's not someone that is consistently going to score against the elite opponents. I think that is evidently clear. But I think a great example of this is when we played against them in the season last year. He went against Gabriel, and although Gyokeres didn't score in that game, and unfortunately for them they lost 5-1, Gyokeres was still lively. And I think that sometimes Gyokeres definitely got the better of Gabriel, but also it was vice versa. And I think some people aren't really looking at the fact that Gyokeres was able to give Gabriel a good game, and he still ended up getting shots away. Okay, some of them were a bit far out and not the best, but you've got to think how Saliba and Gabriel delegate the one striker by himself. I think is something that you're not going to see for Arsenal, and we will get into that, but I don't think that's the best way to use Gyokeres within the Premier League. And ultimately, I think I still was very convinced by the performance against us from what I saw. Now, the last thing that is going on a lot, and I think is probably one of his best attributes, is his ball striking ability. Now, some people will say it's not necessarily as clean as you would want, and I would agree. And you look at some of his shot locations, I think a lot of them get blocked, but that is because he usually shoots a lot of times in the box, and these sort of congested areas can make that happen, which could be worse for Arsenal. But I definitely still think if you give this guy a chance, out of anyone in this Arsenal team, I think he can score much more. Not only that, I think a lot of his shots have power in them. He isn't someone that is always going to precisely put the ball into the corner. Sometimes, I think more than often, a lot of his goals will be because he is a good finisher, but sometimes he will just smash the ball over or just smash it wide because he isn't really going for precision. Now, personally, I like strikers that have a little bit more of power than precision all the time, and I think given his type of player he is, that is absolutely fine. We don't really have anyone that can hit that ball incredibly hard and give that threat. This isn't really mightily important within closer areas within the box and one-on-ones as well. I think you don't want to smash it, you kind of want to place it around the keeper, but ultimately I don't know how many he's going to get for Arsenal in them situations. I think a lot of the time you're going to see him when he has to have pot shots or get shots away within close areas and low blocks or just outside the box, maybe when he peels off. I think you want someone that can hit the ball hard that hopefully doesn't get blocked, as much as you will want a little bit of precision for that not to happen. Now, this is definitely something that I'm not that worried about overall. I think he will come into the team and improve us in that way, but I can definitely see some concerns with maybe his transition, which is something we will have to see. Now, that is a base view of some of the attributes I think might be key for Arsenal, and I also want to go through some of the base attributes that could be quite bad for Arsenal, which I don't like from him at the moment. Now, personally, if you look at a lot of stats of his dribbling and his take on success and how he runs at people, it does look very good. Now, I will say most of his successful take-ons are in them big space areas, which we will get into, but I think that can be fine for Arsenal and he can still be effective from them. But I don't think in tight areas, when you get a few players around him, he is going to maneuver them easily. He is a little bit clunky with his dribbling, and how he dribbles is more brute force than rather technical ability. He isn't someone that is going to do loads of step overs and get past someone with a slight dribble or drop of the shoulder. He is someone that will try and do that, kind of fall over the ball, push someone over and run past them, which can work in the Portuguese league considering the weakness of the defenders and how they defend. But in the Prem, that's going to be a lot harder. The defense in even a team like Everton, you think about Tarkowski, you think about Michael Keane, these players will just stand up you and just take the ball off you. So I wouldn't personally want him doing too much dribbling. I also think when he comes deeper, we're talking about this, sometimes his passing can be a little bit off. Now, I wouldn't say this is a full weakness, so putting it in this category might be a bit of hyperbole, but I do think that it's something that he isn't the best at. He can do these little passes, I think specifically on the break, these little 1-2s, he loves 1-2s, which I think will be amazing. But when it's a bit more of a sustained pressure and you give him more touches on the ball than one, I think unless you're going to expect him to shoot from a distance, it isn't really worth it. He will just slow down play to try and get going and maybe not give us the best output out there. I think we have people like Havertz or Odegaard who'd be a lot more better to do that, which I think is totally fine with how I am going to recommend us to play. And I also obviously want to speak about the on-the-air ability. Now, I've done a lot of research about his ability in the air because I kind of wanted to get to the crutch of why he struggles. Broadly speaking, I think it is mostly down to his jumping ability more than necessarily him in the air. I've seen him be quite decent in the air. He's not amazing, but he is pretty good when the ball actually reaches his head. But Sporting don't really do a lot of lofted crosses for one, and two, he makes a lot of the runs to the wing position in that instance anyway. But three, I also just think that he doesn't necessarily want the ball in the air. He is tall, but he can't jump very high because he is a very heavy player, and this is something to note with him. He isn't lean, he isn't a lanky but strong player like someone like Isak. He is on the complete opposite scale, a very big guy, and sometimes his whole body is quite hard to move. So I think that's where he struggles in the air, especially in the box. However, when there is more space, and I think when coming deeper, he can be used as a heading outlet. Now, he won't be used as that first ball player for Arsenal when we kick the ball long and get Gyokeres to head it down. That's more likely going to be someone like Havertz or someone else that may come in. So I don't really worry in that way because I don't think he'll be used in that. But I do think if push comes to shove and there is a little bit of space there, he can win headers. Most likely not against proper centre-backs, but maybe against midfielders if he comes deeper, will be able to at least head the ball on. It's not something he's brilliant at, but he has improved at it over the last season when I compared to him to the season before. Now, with them attributes kind of addressed, I want to talk about how I think he can work the best with Arsenal. And unfortunately for a lot of you, it might not be what you want to hear, and it is with Kai Havertz. Now, I know a lot of people aren't going to like Kai Havertz. We've gone on for about him loads, and I know his weaknesses, but I still think he's a very important player to the way Arsenal play. And I actually think that his best way that Gyokeres works is with him. Now, this can even be in many different ways. First of all, let's talk about a 4-4-2, maybe a 4-2-4 if you want to give that that and push the wingers up. But realistically, when we still have the ball in possession, it will most likely be a 3-2-5, which we often see by Arsenal going in attack. Now, what I think can be very unique about this is that they can play off each other. Havertz and Gyokeres aren't that different in many ways. There is a very much similarity to them, which is different to Šeško. And I think when people look at the body type of a Šeško, they think he's very much like Havertz, but he actually isn't. Gyokeres is kind of more like him. But ultimately, Havertz's best work is not in the box. I think we can all say that. He is better at coming deeper and being able to receive the ball and put players through. One of the moments that I keep bringing up this season was that one against Everton. Havertz comes deeper, he receives the ball and slips it brilliantly through for Saka. Now the problem is here, Saka goes past one or two players and there is just no one in the box. There's no one gambling, there's no one wanting making that run, and Odegaard is there for the pullback, which we usually go to, but even with his bad finishing throughout last season, it wasn't helping. Now something that Gyokeres can do is he can play off that and make them runs in the box. We mentioned that he makes a lot of runs past the last defender, and I think this is where we're going to get the best out of him. Havertz can come deeper, he can win the headers from first goal kicks and maybe head the ball on for Gyokeres, you can make that run instantly, but also it's much more simpler than that. In build up, if we're struggling to break down a low block or mid block, we can have Havertz come out of the block and give us the ball and help and create and maybe put the ball through for someone, and then get Gyokeres to actually be that focal point in the box. We've seen it so much in the end part of the season when Havertz wasn't even there that we just had no one in there. Marino did a good job, but sometimes he didn't even really occupy them areas. He wanted to be on the outside and receive the ball there. I think the best way Arsenal use Gyokeres is not having this sort of deeper work. We've mentioned I think his hold-up play might be okay. I think it's fine, and I think he can contribute passing and at least holding onto the ball if players are behind him for at least a second to send people through. One of the main reasons why Arsenal struggle, in my opinion, is they just don't have enough runners. There's other things and other problems out there, not enough dribblers and loads of other issues which other players will sort. But in terms of a striker, we need someone that is going to be able to run behind and run closer to the ball. Now, this is why Šeško would have been the real ideal candidate, because he can do both himself. You can still mitigate that by having someone like Havertz do the other work while he does the other. This does mean someone like Odegaard will have to come out the team, but I do think overall in certain game states this may be the best way to use him, especially against teams where I think Arsenal are going to have a lot of the ball anyway. Now the thing that might also be very good about this is if Arsenal do play a team that is wanting to press us a little bit, I also think this could work as well. Gyokeres, if you look at most of his real special goals for Sporting, come in them big spaces where he's able to take multiple players on, composed in the box, and then finish it well. That I do think is the best way Gyokeres is going to be a key for Arsenal. And I do think that we talk about Arsenal not turning over shots when we win the ball back high up. This guy will be able to at least take 2 or 3 players on the break and take a goal on, which is something that we have needed really well. And instantly, I think that gets us at least 10 more goals this season by having someone that knows what they're doing in them positions. But I do think from deeper positions, having someone that's always willing to run will help everyone. I think Odegaard will have much more benefit. We've seen some of his assists before where he's in deeper areas, being able to roam around the pitch, being able to slide through balls, and with Gyokeres always running, I think that is really good. And when he is in that run, he is incredibly fast. He can easily go past defenders, he can easily catch up to that space and easily power a shot in. But ultimately, it's just about getting into them areas in the first place. Obviously, we mentioned the double striker system, maybe playing a 4-2-4 would be the best way to do it, but there's also been some suggestions about other things. I have heard a few people say that maybe Gyokeres should be played as a left-sided player. Now what I mean by that is he isn't really going to be a left winger, but he can play on that left side. If you've watched Gyokeres and watched any highlight packages on him, you will see a lot of his runs are really catered towards his left-hand side. Now something me and Forder have mentioned quite a lot on our podcast over there, so I would go and recommend watching it on his channel, is that if Arsenal signed an inside forward, could they replicate that inside movement like we see Martinelli do sometimes if Gyokeres is going to give us more pressure on that left-hand side? Now, first of all, I will say just Gyokeres being more left-hand side presence will help us. I think we're too right-side biased at the moment, and I think getting a striker over there would be better. I think Marino moving over to the left was just a massive benefit of him, even if he isn't a striker. But also, could he work with a Havertz by himself in that position? Now, he wouldn't be the wider player, and there would have to be issues with maybe an overlapping player, maybe like a Calafiori, or maybe another left-back would have to come in for that. But Gyokeres can make their movements out wide early on, always pushing the team, and then cut inside after. The reason why this may work is because there's been moments last season where it's Sterling or whoever's on that left-hand side just doesn't make that penetratory run that we need. Arsenal would get the ball, finally breaking the press in the midfield, and there'd be not enough runners. There'd be too many people on that right-hand side. You'd see Havertz move over there, and maybe a winger like Saka be too close together, and we just wouldn't have enough presence either in the centre or on the left. And I think Gyokeres is going to bring either one of that, depending on what you want, which could work. Now, obviously, if you sign an Eze, if you sign a Madueke, even if you sign a Rodrigo, not going to work. One of them is going to probably have to start in that left wing position. Not going to really make sense to play Gyokeres out there. I understand that. I just think it could be an option in some games. And I do want to say, this doesn't change the fact I still want Havertz, if he plays, to run in behind. He will still play a lot next season, and I still think his runs are the most important thing. But like we mentioned, with Havertz having to come deeper sometimes and playing the ball through, we finally got someone that will just be in the box and be ready for the chances. I think specifically Saka will benefit a lot from having this, and so will Odegaard. Just having someone that always makes these runs. There's so many times where Arsenal get the ball in brilliant wing positions and we just do not take it because we have no one to pass it to, and everyone's holding off or going backwards. Well, we need people to get into the box. Not only can a Gyokeres do this, but obviously a Rodrigo can get into the back post and be a lot more closer to the goal, and Eze would be someone that is incredible at putting them balls through on the left half channel, which could help Gyokeres even more. And in my opinion, the fact that Gyokeres is now looks like he's coming in, I think we have to kind of move on that Eze deal. I think that would make more sense now with a Gyokeres than a Šeško. And ultimately, we're going to have a lot of pressure anyway with Zubimendi and his brilliant passing and Rice in the midfield. Now, looking at some of his stats, I do wanted to mention, because I do still think it is a relevant point. If you look at his stats in over compared to the league that he's in, it is incredible. And obviously, a lot of people said that that will scale down a lot in the Premier League. Now, in the Champions League, however, it is very different. He has still got good stats, although he didn't play an utmost loads of games. I think he started 6 games and he came off the bench for 2 against Leipzig and Dortmund, and overall got 6 goals and 1 assist. So very good record. Obviously a hat-trick against Man City, and he did score against Lille, Sturm Graz and Leipzig. So not the worst teams, but not the best as well. Now, in some of these games he looks really good, and some of the games he struggles a little bit. I think the games he struggles the most on are games that has to rely on his teammates a lot more. He can't really impact the game and get them runs that he needs. Now, for Arsenal, I'm taking a risk here and saying Arsenal should do that with him, and that is obviously because I think our quality of players are better, our overall play is good, and we will create chances for him. I agree that a striker for Arsenal needs to be somewhat self-efficient, and I think he is. We'll have to see how that scales up to the Premier League, but I necessarily don't agree that the striker specifically has to be a really self-sufficient player overall. I think we create enough chances, and we still will create enough chances to give him enough goals at the end of the day. In my opinion, a left winger or a midfielder has to be more self-sufficient than a striker. He is just the end piece of the puzzle. He also neglects the fact that we don't need Rice in that left centre mid to always make them runs into the box. He is a good box crashing player, and I like him for that role, but if you have these players in there, it's not so much of a necessity. This means you can have a little bit fun. You can play an Eze in that left centre mid spot, maybe Rice in the right centre mid. You can play a double pivot and have a little bit more creativity work rather than just being brute force. We're going to cross the ball in and hopefully you head it in. It gives us a little bit more of imagination, I believe, in that sort of area. And even looking at his Champions League stats, I know it's not the biggest sample size in the world, but he still has a 0.59 non-penalty goals, 0.4 XG non-penalty goals, which is pretty good, 3.8 shot creating actions, and 3.5 shots. And you compare that to his tally in the Portuguese league, he obviously has 0.89 on goals, and obviously really high non-penalty goals, which is incredible in XG. But I think the most important thing is if you look at the shots that he's having, 3.5 per game, and then he has around 4 shots per game. And I kind of think Arsenal get into good positions, but we don't have enough players that pull the trigger. Gyokeres will, Madueke will, I know some of you won't like that, but he will. Eze will as well. I think as soon as you get into the box, I would trust Gyokeres to be able to get away chances and be able to score. And I always say this about Gyokeres when I analyse him and I speak about him. If you ask proper analysts that are honest with themselves, most of them will say that they just don't know how he's going to translate into the Prem. He's probably one of the most unique players to ever come to the Premier League from the career he's had and from the Portuguese league and how many goals he's scored. Because yes, there has been players that have scored a lot of goals, not the goals that he has scored in that league, but it's still very different. I don't like looking at him and saying, well, he scored all these goals, he will in the Prem. I like looking at things a bit deeper, but I also don't think that's a bad thing as well. He is clearly a very determined player and will find ways to score. Against Man City, was he amazing? No, he scored 2 penalties and a one-on-one, and he also missed another one-on-one, but he still had chances. Is he amazing consistently in games you look at? No, but does he score? Yes. And that is one of the things that I think will just be a mental upgrade for the team. Having someone that is determined to score and will find a way to score is important. He has developed himself incredibly well over every year to get better and better of what he's needed to do. And yes, he's more of a transitional player, but that is because Sporting play that way. He can still get good shots away against low blocks if you give him the chance, and I believe and I trust in him to learn and develop. Even though he is 27, I know that, but he has the sort of mental curve to learn things very quickly. I think that will just help the team mentally curve a lot more. And ultimately, am I the most happy about the transfer? No, but I understand why it's been made, and I don't think any Arsenal fan should be sad about this at all. I do think he will be a very interesting player. Is he going to be that elite forward we're all talking about? No, but will he help the team? Yes. And we just haven't simply had any strikers in the last 3 years that have been fit enough that score goals, and I think he will finally do that. Now, I know this one's been a long one, and I know a lot of you are going to have very different opinions. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about him and where he's going to fit in, and who do you think will sign alongside him? Is it an Eze, is it a Madueke, or is it a Rodrigo? They seem to be the most credible links so far. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it as always, and I'll see you in the next one.